everybody? Welcome to a new vlog. I'm starting on a Friday today, and it's mainly because I had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to rant about Daniel Deronda. So I have been reading up to, I think we're on book 6 is the number. We're just past the book after Mordecai, and I have so many thoughts about Daniel Deronda. I think I was annoying everybody in the grad lounge the other day because I just couldn't shut up about it. Because it is so weird, and like I can't decide what to make of it because it's probably the book that I felt the most engaged by. It's the one that I'm enjoying her writing the most in, I would say, but it's the one that's making me like side-eye George Eliot the most, because I'm like, do you just like low-key hate women? It's pretty clear that she just doesn't find men particularly interesting. Like her women characters are always so much more complex. There's always so much going on. They feel much more developed, whereas her male characters, particularly like her male heroes, are like so kind of wooden and like conventionalized and cliche. Like Daniel Deronda is very that, and he's very similar to Felix Holt in Felix Holt. And both of these books should be named after the women. Like Daniel Deronda especially, it's kind of two separate novels mashed together really, and I definitely find the Gwendolyn story the most compelling. So basically Gwendolyn starts off the book, she's kind of self-centered. She like also has like very kind of grand ideas of who she is and what her life could be like. She doesn't really know what she's gonna do, but she knows she's destined for greatness. She likes being admired by people and admired by men, but you know, when they take it too far and start getting too serious, she's a little disgusted. So she's not like totally against the idea of marriage as a concept with like the idea of like a perfect man, but she's not like actively seeking out marriage, if that makes sense. But circumstances, the family is kind of left destitute. Her mother and her sisters who she dates are going to have to start working kind of as like seamstresses sort of things. She's going to have to go and be kind of sent away as a governess, and she's like, that sounds absolutely terrible. So she decides to marry Grandcourt, who's this man that she like knew was about to propose to her, but she found out that he'd had like a mistress with like 4 kids. And then they get married. The mistress like writes to her with this letter and is like, you ruined my life. This is your fault, essentially. So she kind of, the like moral question of that, or I guess like the morality of it is placed onto Gwendolyn, I think quite unfairly. And I think that the novel is very clear about the fact that like something that's recurrent in George Eliot's fiction and in this novel is definitely doing that, is this idea of like women just like lacking choice, and there not being not many good options for women. And I think the book is quite sympathetic to Gwendolyn. You're like, yeah, she was probably hard to live with, but she was also just like so ill prepared by everyone around her for what marriage is, especially to a man like Grandcourt. Like the novel goes as far to the line as she could have for the time period to make it clear that like Gwendolyn is experiencing marital rape, like she's being sexually abused. Like it's very clear, but she's like constantly then getting lectured by Daniel, because so at the beginning of the story, Gwendolyn is like gambling and she kind of just gets a dirty look from Daniel. And since then, he kind of becomes for her like her externalized conscience. So she's seeking him out. It feels like, okay, she's trying to like make sense of what's happening to her now. And she's kind of like, oh, it must be like punishment or whatever for this like wrong that I did to this other woman. And Daniel's like, yeah. And he's basically like, I think he understands what's happening to an extent, maybe not entirely, but he can clearly see that this is a bad marriage. Like he doesn't like Grandcourt. He realizes that like she is in pain or is in a bad situation. And he's like, you know, think about the pain and the fear that you're experiencing and let it like make you a more moral person, you know? Like it's, so the book, and Daniel really does feel like George Eliot's kind of like mouthpiece in the book. So it's hard to reconcile in these scenes where he's lecturing her and like where she's so desperate to be like, okay, are we supposed to be like, what the hell, Daniel? Or are we supposed to be like, oh, this is so harsh, but like, yeah, like take this and turn it into living this like morally pure and perfect life, because I also really resent the fact that Gwendolyn is kind of like placed in contrast to Mira, who is just every cliche for like a perfect woman thrown together. I don't know enough about sort of the historical context for anti-Semitism at that time period in England, but I do think that it is probably radical that George Eliot is presenting Mira, who's very devoted to her Jewish faith, as being like so morally centered and morally pure, but Mira as a character is like, oh, she's so teeny tiny, she's so teeny tiny, she's so like endlessly grateful and beseeching to Daniel and everyone around her. Like she's not a real person or a real character. She's like an idea, and she's, yeah, just like every convention in one. Whereas Gwendolyn like is such a well-written and compelling character, but sometimes it feels like it's well-written in spite of what George Eliot's trying to do. Like, yeah, it is very like, yeah, this thing is horrible, but also like gonna make you a better person. So I don't know, it's just very hard to rationalize. It is interesting, like George Eliot being an atheist, that she is, I think, kind of really putting forward this kind of like Christian moral framework, just without kind of religious faith or faith in God being kind of the motivating factor. Like that is still, I think, kind of the moral framework that she is placing onto Gwendolyn. And yeah, I don't know. It's the most engrossing of her books that we've read, but the one that has like filled me with the most rage. So we have our class today. We really have not talked very much in the seminars about the kind of Jewish plots in the novel. We've touched on the fact that, you know, like Daniel meets them and now he's suddenly like exploring synagogues, he's learning these things. But we haven't really touched on that too much, in part because that plot is kind of like just kicking off. But also because I think we are just all much more interested in the Gwendolyn plots, really, because she's like so much more compelling character than Daniel. Daniel sucks. I want to punt him across a football field. And to be fair, at this point with the kind of other book, it's really just at the part where it's like a history lesson, you know, where she's having characters monologue and just like dumping information on you. So it's just not as interesting yet. We'll see if it gets as interesting. I kind of doubt it because the characters are more boring than Gwendolyn is. Like, just write the Gwendolyn book, which apparently is what Portrait of a Lady is. Apparently, like, at least in part, Henry James was like, okay, here's my other Gwendolyn. Don't know if it's better or not, but it makes me a bit curious for it. So that's my mini rant this morning, but now I'm gonna go work at the writing center. So I had a pretty long day on campus today. I was at the writing center this morning. Didn't have any students. I feel like the last couple of weeks it had picked up a little bit in terms of like I actually had appointments and people coming to the drop-in hours. But yeah, today no one. Speaking to other tutors who've worked there in previous years, they said that like, yeah, the winter term is always a little bit slower just because, you know, people have been at school for a semester, so they maybe feel a little bit more confident in university writing, so like aren't accessing the center as much maybe. But apparently this term has also been like slower than past years, which is interesting. So not totally sure why, but yeah. But after that I had my George Eliot seminar. Did not make me happier about Daniel Deronda. If anything, it made me angrier. We talked a lot about like Gwendolyn sort of making Deronda her externalized conscience and like her looking to him for this guide, even though he is not asked to be one for her. He's not sought out that position, which I do agree with that reading. Like he has not sought this out and she has kind of like sort of identified him or glommed onto him as this like spiritual moral guide and someone just to like help her in this situation, but it's because she literally has no one else and he's the only person who seems to understand or have sympathy, even though he doesn't fully understand the scenario of like who Grandcourt is and what he's doing to her. I don't think he has a full picture or a full understanding of it, but he's the only person who like is seeming to express any amount of like sympathy or understanding towards her about Grandcourt. So she seeks him out. And also, to say he's not seeking out that position, I think is true, but he's also not hesitating to scold her. And it is this idea in the book that like, yeah, the situation is terrible. You're going through all this pain, but like low-key, you deserve it. And also, now you just need to use that to make you a better person. And it is, I do think that Deronda and the book, and therefore Eliot, does place this as like Gwendolyn's fault, because then we were discussing that like, she's asking Grandcourt what to do as a way of like abdicating her own responsibility and decision making, which I don't agree with, because I think that that is how the book is presenting it, but I don't think that that is necessarily what's happening, because I think that the whole point is that Gwendolyn really doesn't have a choice, and I think she doesn't see a way out of this. So she's looked at Deronda, who seems to have all the answers all the time and all of these opinions about like what's morally good, and is like, hey, do you have, what can I possibly do? Because they say like she has no legal recourse, like the law can't protect her, like her mom isn't going to be able to help her, her uncle isn't going to be able to help her or wouldn't help her. Hugo couldn't. There's literally no one that she can go to for help in this scenario. So she has no answers. So I think she's looking to Deronda as someone that she sees as maybe being able to have an answer for what she can do. But his answer is just to like suffer. And so it's so frustrating, especially because Gwendolyn is such a dynamic and interesting character. The professor had mentioned that potentially Deronda is a way of Eliot kind of like exploring what she had kind of become by that point in her career as a person, like because people had seen her as this like wise woman, and people would like come up and grab her skirt and everything. So it's kind of like cautioning against, or this rebuttal against, like looking towards people or making these people kind of like moral guideposts for you outside of your own will, which I think is interesting and I think is somewhat true. But I also think that Daniel is just so flawed as being this kind of morally central character, because so much of his sympathy, even towards the kind of Jewish plotline and Mira and Mordecai, which is the characters that he's more invested in and sees himself more as a savior of, and is kind of like taking on more deliberately than Gwendolyn. Even that is primarily, honestly, I think born of his attraction to Mira, or at least that's how it appears so far. Also from his own like lack of certainty about his upbringing. So then when he finds out he's Jewish, it is then him kind of finding community. But the thing that is so interesting to me is that like prior to him finding out, like people keep asking him if he's Jewish, and he's very like adamant and kind of disgusted and offended by this. Like he's like, no, I'm not Jewish, of course not. Like, and interacting with Jewish characters, he will sometimes have this like vague disgust at them. Like there is this like deeply ingrained anti-Semitism even in Deronda. So I think that like the novel itself I can't really make sense of it yet. Like if Deronda is supposed to be this like good moral guidepost, because I find him to be quite a wooden character, or if it's supposed to be like, look at how flawed he is as this kind of moral voice that other characters are putting onto him. Because he does identify as an Englishman, but even in those kind of like upper crust society circles, he's just always there looking on it kind of coldly, and again like with disgust. Like he does think that he's also kind of better than all of the aristocratic people that he's interacting with, because he's like, I'm like morally better, I'm socially better than them. And he has this kind of like protectiveness or like want towards people who are subjugated, because he, I think, kind of has like a savior complex or something, and because he's not sure of his own birth. So he like sort of identifies with him, but sort of also identifies himself as above them. And even when he realizes that he's Jewish, or when he is kind of like more accepting of these Jewish characters, it is also with this whole idea of him identifying like, well, these Jewish people are okay versus these other ones who aren't. So yeah, I hate Daniel. I love Gwendolyn. I'm very irritated by the novel's like answers to the Gwendolyn question, because I think that the novel and our discussion are like, how horrible is this scenario for Gwendolyn, but I think the novel also lacks the sympathy and understanding that it is kind of like purporting itself to have, because there is just this like, well, suffer, but there isn't necessarily figuring of like, well, she has to suffer and just kind of accept it because there's no other recourse. More like, oh, and now you have to make meaning of it because like you did this to yourself and you're actively doing it to other people, which I don't think either is necessarily true. Like, yes, she did make this decision to enter into this marriage, but it was because she was completely backed into a corner. And I think that having these other moral demands of her is really contrasted by the idea that she has like no understanding of the world. Like, prior to getting married, she like had no real idea like what happened in the marriage bed. Like, she didn't know what sex was. She didn't understand that men could have mistresses or would have children. So I think that like having this kind of like morality placed onto her, or implying that like she's abdicating her decisions, or that she's like so egotistical and self-involved that she doesn't understand that other people have other things going on, like that Daniel has this other thing that he's invested in, and these other questions that he's trying to answer, or that like Mira would, or these other characters. I don't think it's that so much as like her world is so small and is so controlled by other people, and now is even more so controlled by Grandcourt, who's taking that kind of to even more extremes than it already like structurally and socially was. So yeah, I've been ranting about this novel quite a bit, obviously, but it is the one that I'm like enjoying the most, if we can say that. I guess I had like more pure enjoyment out of Silas Marner because it wasn't getting to me as much, but I think that this is her best constructed novel. I think it's her most complex novel, and it's the one where I'm enjoying her writing the most, because in the previous novels, especially other than Silas Marner, I just felt like I didn't actually like her writing that much. Like I said, it felt like every scene would kind of play out, and it would play through. The scene would be basically over, and then it would continue for between like 2 to 10 more pages. But I don't think that that's necessarily happening as much in Daniel Deronda, other than that, because it's not as kind of like steeped in realism as some of her other stories, is that there are things that are a bit kind of like hand of fate, or even the fact that like Mira just sits aside and monologues her backstory for like 5 pages. Mordecai also goes on long kind of tangents, which to be fair, I'm doing now, so maybe it's not that unrealistic. But like sometimes the way that people talk isn't as closely to how people would actually converse, which I do feel like her other novels captured pretty well. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see the development of her writing, and this is like her last novel. So yeah, I don't know. I would probably say that this one is my favorite, even though I hate pretty much everyone in it other than Gwendolyn and everything that's happening in it. But now it's Friday night, so I'm either going to decide if I'm just going to torture myself more and continue reading some of Daniel Deronda, or I might watch a movie. For some reason, me and a couple of the other girls have been talking a lot about, like talking twice this week about The Sure Thing, so I might see if that's available to stream anywhere and watch that. Hi guys, so it's Saturday today, and I've just spent the morning, I've been mainly grading today. That's kind of my task for the weekend because we have so many assignments that are all kind of right back to back for my TA class. So I'm grading their third essay that's kind of their last essay, because for their like final assignment, it's like a revise option for one of their previous two bigger essays. So I've been grading that. Also like reviewing some annotated bibliographies that they had, because when they revise their essay, they have to add in secondary sources. So I was mainly going through that for like which sources are, if the sources are credible or not, and if they'll be, you know, useful for their essays. So I did most of that during the week when they came in, but then a few people are using extension days and stuff to submit late. So I just did a few that had come in. But yeah, then I was doing more grading earlier today. But me and Maggie are gonna go to this barbecue restaurant that actually Johanna had said was really good. So shout out again to Johanna and Grace if you guys are watching this. We're going to go try it because it's supposed to be quite good. Yeah, so that was basically like all I've really got going on for today, but it's nice spring weather today. Yeah, and I think I'd forgotten to mention this yesterday, but I'd gone to this like speaker series that they have at the department. So it's sort of every week during term time when there was one scheduled, essentially. So it was for a Broadview anthology that one of the professors at Dalhousie put together. So it's a Broadview anthology of science fiction. So the book I think mainly has like short fiction, but then also has some like poems, comics, I think, and maybe some other stuff. There was more on the list, but I'm trying to remember what other things are in it. He talked about like music and everything, but as you add more of those, like it gets quite crazy. And then also like paying for contributors and everything. But so he talked a little bit, like kind of through his introduction and through the idea of the book. And then there was also two other speakers. One is also a professor from the department, and then one I believe was from a different department at Dal, but they were mainly talking about like Afrofuturism in science fiction, which isn't like the only thing that's included in the Broadview anthology, but it is like a big focus of the anthology. So that was really interesting. The one speaker was speaking about like two short stories, one actually by N.K. Jemisin, who I'd read a short story for my TA class, because we read The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and then N.K. Jemisin has written kind of like a short story in response to the Le Guin one. So it was interesting to hear about another story. And then I forget who the author was from the other one that she discussed. And then the other speaker was talking a bit about like Afrofuturism a bit more broadly. And it was really interesting to hear about it in relationship to science fiction, because I don't read a ton of science fiction, but it is like often very connected to fantasy and like, you know, other kinds of genre fiction. So he had said something that I thought was really cool about sort of Afrofuturism is not necessarily writing to this imagined world's kind of, this isn't the word he used, but this kind of like breaking point or changing point. You know, like it's not writing to this future imagined one, it's writing to the present and the historical moment. Which I thought was really interesting, and kind of talking specifically about Afrofuturism in sci-fi as specifically thinking about African and Black people's relationship to technology and to changing technology. So yeah, it was a really cool presentation, and I think it was the last one that they're having this term. So yeah, I thought that was quite cool. And I did not read any more of Daniel Deronda. Last night, I watched The Sure Thing instead, which is as funny as it was before. Definitely wouldn't be made today, but I think it holds up. I hadn't seen it in a really long time, but yeah, I love John Cusack. So yeah, I'll probably be doing a little bit more grading today before I head off to have some barbecue, but yeah, that's kind of my plans for the rest of the day. Hello everybody, so it's Sunday morning today. I don't really remember where last I left off. The barbecue place was really good. It's called Boneheads Barbecue, and it's definitely more of like a takeout place. They just have like the counter and then a few tables out, but the food was really, really good. So we each just got like the kind of platters where you pick a few different meats. So I have some leftovers, which is nice. But yeah, food was really good, was fun, so would recommend. And yeah, today I have a couple of errands to do. I have to go grocery shopping, and then I also have to go to Staples, because I guess Staples is just the promised land and they do absolutely everything. Because I don't know if you would have seen in the background, but I have two identical Keurigs on my counter because my original Keurig just kind of broke. Like, I would press the on button and then it would go and then stop. So I was like doing the fixes that were on the Keurig website, which was literally just like clean the needles. And then I was reading like posts and YouTube videos and everyone was like, spank it. So I was like, all right, because apparently it's like air bubbles will get trapped in it or something. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I think I just like fell prey to some trolling. I don't know. But there was multiple posts that said that, so I went to like pick it up to smack it, and a bunch of water just fell out of it, and it looked like there had been water like leaking out the bottom previously on the counter. So I think probably like the hose or something inside had like become disconnected or messed up. I don't know. But I had the K-Cup Mini, so you can't like remove the water reservoir. You can't really access any of the internal components. So the Keurig customer service was great. I called the customer service. I was on hold for like maybe 5 minutes. The guy was like, did you do all of the things that we say on the website? And I was like, yes. And he was like, oh, okay, then you can't do anything else because you can't open it. But like when you buy the machine, it has a 1-year warranty, and it was within the warranty. So they were like, we'll just send you a new one. But I had to like submit the like product number that's on the Keurig, whatever the model number, I don't know. And like pictures of it, and then a picture of my receipt. And so I submitted that, and then it got like rejected. So I was like, what? So I called again, and they actually like manually went and looked over the files, because I think it's just like an automated, probably AI thing, and it had like shut it down because it didn't see the like store name printed clearly, or it wasn't like where the automated system whatever was seeing it. But they were like, this is fine. So they like manually set it up to send me a new one. So I have my new Keurig, but I need to recycle the old one. And apparently Staples has like an electronics small appliances recycling center, or some of them do. And then I also had like, Abercrombie had done like a big sale. So I was like, I'm gonna try some jeans because I don't really have any that I like here. Well, I have ones that like I like and don't mind, but I feel like they don't like both. I have two pairs here really that like, and both of them look slightly off. One is for some reason too short now. I don't know. And then the other pair, or they just look kind of short with the shoes that I usually wear. Maybe that's it. I don't know. And then the other pair is like really stretched out, I think. Or, you know, I'm just such a skinny legend. It could be that. So I was like, I'll try a couple pairs. They were both way too big and also didn't look super flattering on me, so I'm just returning them. And Staples also, it has to be like a perolator one, I guess. So Staples has like a QR code drop-off center, apparently. So I'm gonna go grocery shopping, and then I'm gonna try to bus it to Staples, which I was going to do at least one of those things yesterday, but then I got lazy. But today I'm procrastinating marking, so they're both gonna get done. So I'm back now, and I wasn't able to recycle my Keurig, which I'm suspicious about, because I just went up to the guy to basically ask like where the recycling center was, but I phrased it as like, do you guys like recycle electronics or appliances? And he asked what I had, and I said like a Keurig, and he said, no, it's just kind of like computers and that kind of thing. And I was like, you know, that makes more sense. However, their website says that they take appliances, and they specify small coffee machines. So long story short, I still have two Keurigs. Tried to recycle it properly, but I was foiled. But I evidently came home at the right time, because I don't know if it's picking up. It's snowing again. However, I still really don't want to grade, so I'm gonna make cookies instead. These are my cookie balls. They seem massive, but I just did what Sally's Baking Edition told me to do. Addiction. But they say that they have to like chill for at least 2 hours, so I'm gonna stick them in the fridge. But this recipe doesn't make a ton, because I guess they're massive. So I've graded, I think, like 10 now, but this is basically what I'm doing for the rest of the night. So I'm probably going to end this here because, yeah, I'm just going to be grading, and then I'm also going to be doing, potentially reading some more of Daniel Deronda before tomorrow, although, you know, it has not been good for my mental health, apparently. And also in the next section, we have Gwendolyn really getting, you know, her rocked because Harcourt implies Harcourt. That's from something. Maybe that's from a different George Eliot book. Whatever, doesn't matter. Grand Court says to Gwendolyn that, oh, like, probably Deronda is having an affair with Mira because, like, what else would he be doing with this woman? And she crashes out and she's like, oh my god, it's just everybody having an affair all the time. Is nobody, like, good? Yes, Gwendolyn. So she runs over to Mira's and is like, can you give me the lowdown? But then eventually Mira is like, Daniel's probably off with someone like Gwendolyn, and the idea of Gwendolyn, like, Gwendolyn is becoming more and more repugnant to me. I was not a huge fan of Mira from the get-go. She has like this 5-page backstory, which the backstory is vaguely interesting, but her backstory boils down to, I'm an incredible singer, I'm an incredible actress, but I'm just better than all those whores on stage. So I don't love that. And then she kind of just like maintains that, and she's just very like, it's kind of like, oh, everybody who's ever helped me is the greatest person in the world. Daniel is just, he's incredible, blah, blah, blah. And I really don't understand why they are all so obsessed with Daniel. To be fair, like, he does stop her from committing suicide, so she maybe has some hero worship. That makes a little bit of sense. Other than the fact, does he do anything, or is he just like driving his boat near her? But she is not like a real character. But then when it turns into this, like, everybody just hates Gwendolyn for no apparent reason. And it is a thing where I can't fully make out what the book's trying to do. It's not necessarily that I think Gwendolyn needs to have a better like ending, or that there needs to be this happy ending for Gwendolyn, because the whole point of it is that, like, this is a terrible situation and like women don't have a lot of choices. But then everybody in the book is kind of implying that Gwendolyn is making choices and that she's making the wrong choices. It's odd, like, because it doesn't feel like you're supposed to disagree with or be like put off by the people kind of expressing that opinion. It feels like you're supposed to agree with them. But maybe you're not supposed to agree with them and you're supposed to figure it out later, and you see that like all of these other people are flawed in other ways, because I think that you are supposed to tell that like these other people don't understand like kind of the fullness of the story. But then the fact that they're supposed to be these kind of like morally perfect, like idealized kind of heroic characters, then the way that they treat Gwendolyn and treat Gwendolyn's situation is it's very kind of like just, it doesn't fit with what Gwendolyn's story is. So it's just odd until I get to the end. Like I said, it's the one that I'm the most kind of like feel the most invested in as a reader, so there's that. Someone also in my last video had left a comment about kind of like motherhood and Daniel Deronda, which was very, very helpful. So if you're watching this, shout out. That was really helpful as I've been reading this. Because yeah, I feel like it is probably my favorite George Eliot books because it's had the most like reaction in me. So yeah, I am excited to see tomorrow because Maggie is doing the prompts for class, and I know that like I've been just ranting in the English lounge every single day, and she's been like, yeah, I don't understand. So I'm very excited to see what questions she comes up with. But I'm gonna stop ranting about Daniel Deronda now. I've got 1 week left of it, so the next vlog will also probably have me crashing out a little bit more about it, but then that will probably be the end. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.